All right, today we're going to tear into the brand new M-Trends 2025 report from the folks over at Google Cloud Security. Now, this isn't just some theoretical paper. This is a guide straight from the front lines, built from thousands of real-world cybersecurity incidents. So let's dive in and see what they found. 11 days. Take that number in for a second. That is the new global median for how long an attacker is inside a network before anyone even knows they're there. And here's the kicker. For the first time in more than a decade, that number has actually gone up. It's a small change, but it tells us something big is happening. The game is definitely changing. So to get our heads around why, we're going to walk through this report in 5 key parts. First, the big picture landscape. Then, how are they getting in? We'll also look at a really surprising threat that's already inside. We'll touch on the new battlefield in the cloud. And finally, the most important part, what you can actually do to secure your own digital front door. So let's kick things off with part 1, the big picture. What are the major trends that are really defining cyber attacks right now? The report boils it all down to 3 huge challenges. First, there's been an absolute explosion of what's called info-stealer malware. Think of it like a little vacuum cleaner for passwords, designed to suck up saved credentials from your browser and your computer, which then fuels a massive black market. Second, attackers are having a field day finding sensitive data just lying around in unsecured places, like company SharePoint sites or code repositories that just aren't locked down properly. And third, as everyone rushes to the cloud, attackers are getting way better at finding and exploiting the little security gaps that get left behind during that move. And that last point really brings us to our second section. How are attackers actually getting that initial foothold? Let's look at the data. Okay, so for the 5th year in a row, exploiting vulnerabilities in software is still the #1 way in. It's about 1/3 of all breaches. Honestly, no big surprise there. But the real story this year, the thing that made everyone sit up and take notice, is what's happening right below that top spot. And here it is, the big shift. Last year, in 2023, good old email phishing was the solid #2 way in. But this year, it's been knocked off its perch by attackers using stolen credentials. I mean, think about that. They're not always trying to trick you anymore. A lot of the time, they're just flat out buying your password online. So what's going on here? Well, the report connects it directly back to that info-stealer malware we were just talking about. It has created this massive booming economy. These malicious programs infect computers, scrape up every saved password and cookie they can find, and then sell them off in huge batches on criminal forums. It's basically created an entire supply chain for hacking. And this obsession with credentials brings us to what is, honestly, one of the wildest stories in this entire report, a completely new kind of insider threat. Let's talk about what happens when the call is coming from inside the house. And this is not a hypothetical. I want you to imagine you hire a super talented remote software developer. They do amazing work, they hit all their deadlines, but they aren't who they say they are. And in fact, every dollar of their 6-figure salary is being funneled directly back to a hostile, sanctioned nation-state. Sound like a spy movie? Well, it's real. And it's happening so often now that it accounts for a full 5% of all initial compromises that Mandiant investigated. That is a massive jump for the insider threat category. And get this, it's almost entirely driven by one incredibly sophisticated campaign run by IT workers from North Korea. Their playbook is it's unbelievable. They build these elaborate fake online personas, sometimes using real, stolen US identities. Then, to get past things like physical checks, they actually hire facilitators in the target country to, say, receive a company laptop in the mail or even show up to pass a drug test for them. Then, they use VPNs and these remote laptop farms to make it look like they're working right there in the US, all while funneling that salary back to the North Korean regime. And here's why this is so terrifying. These aren't just ghost employees. They are given legitimate, trusted, and often highly privileged access to source code, to databases, to internal networks. Now, their primary goal is just to make money, but the report found that when these workers think they're about to be discovered, some of them have flipped a switch, turning to data theft and extortion, weaponizing the very access they were freely given. So this whole idea of exploiting trusted identities, well, it becomes even more critical when we shift our focus to the new battlefield, the cloud. Because in the cloud, identity isn't just a way in, it's basically everything. Attackers know that the lines between our work laptop, our home Wi-Fi, and our cloud accounts are super blurry these days, and they just love to exploit that confusion. I mean, take a look at this. It's a real example from the report. It's a malicious backdoor disguised as a totally legitimate installer for a corporate VPN client. It looks real, it acts real, but in the background, it's handing the attacker the keys to the kingdom. And what this really all boils down to is that we just can't think of on-prem security over here and cloud security over there as two separate things anymore. Attackers certainly don't. They see one big interconnected environment, and they are experts at getting a foothold in one place to pivot to the other. Now, a huge reason they can do this is because a lot of organizations misunderstand this one key concept, the shared responsibility model. There's this feeling that if you move to the cloud, hey, the provider handles all the security, right? Well, not exactly. The provider secures the infrastructure, the cloud itself, but you are still 100% responsible for securing your own data, your configurations, and most importantly, who has access to it. And this case study from the report lays it all out perfectly. It all starts with a simple malware infection on a local on-premise machine. From there, the attacker climbs the ladder until they become a domain admin. But here's the critical part. Because the company synced its on-prem user directory to the cloud, that on-prem access gave them the keys to a cloud admin account. And from there, it was game over. They just used the cloud's own powerful tools to deploy ransomware everywhere. The on-prem keys opened all the cloud doors. Okay, so with all of that, what on earth are we supposed to do about it? That brings us to our final and most important section, securing your digital front door. Look, if you take away only one thing from this whole explainer, let it be this. The old idea of a secure network perimeter, protected by a big firewall at the office, that's over. It's obsolete. In a world of remote work and cloud apps, the real perimeter, the real front door, is identity. Protecting credentials is protecting the network. So based on that one big idea, the report offers 4 really high-impact strategies. First, enforce phishing-resistant multi-factor authentication. I'm not talking about those text message codes. We know those can be intercepted. I mean things like hardware security keys. Second, isolate your powerful cloud admin accounts from your on-prem network to break that attack chain we just saw. Third, you have to actively hunt for passwords and access keys that your own people have left lying around in your data stores and your code. And finally, you have to adopt a zero-trust mindset, which basically means you trust nobody by default, and you verify every single user for every single request, every single time. Which really leaves us all with one final critical question to chew on. In this new world where attackers aren't really forging keys anymore but are just buying them on the open market, we all have to ask ourselves, how well are our own digital doors truly locked? Thanks for joining us for this explainer.